the secret to saving time, right? Everybody's got the same amount of time in a day, but there's people like Elon who send people to fucking Mars, and then there's people like you who sit on the couch and watch TV all day. But we all have the same 24 hours in a day. So clearly, some people have developed ways of using their time more effectively than others. Those people make more money. Those people get more things accomplished. Okay, so how do we get closer to the level of Elon and everything he's able to accomplish on a day-to-day basis as opposed to the guy sitting on the couch, eating chips, drinking his beer, watching football all day? It's a big difference in terms of how these people are spending their time. So here's the best way to be able to develop a mindset that allows you to earn more money in the same time frame. Okay, so I'll give you a simple example. Most people, they're working 9 to 5s. So they go to work Monday through Friday. They work 40 hours a week, and then they get their paycheck every 2 weeks. You get like $2,000. Some bullshit. All right. So if you want to make more money and do more with your time, you don't need to focus so much on the number and how much money you're trying to make, or if you're in sales, how much business you're trying to sell, how much premium is supposed to write. You need to focus on what you've already accomplished in the past and then figuring out how to do that in a smaller time frame. Okay, so I got this advice from a very good friend of mine, right? And he articulated this point to me so fantastically that as soon as I implemented it, boom, just like that, double my production, double the money I was making instantly. No joke, literally instantly. So here's what you need to do. So let's say you're working an hourly wage, right? You work 40 hours a week. Every 2 weeks, you get paid $2,000. So instead of trying to figure out how you're going to make $8,000 in 2 weeks and how the fuck you're going to figure that out, what you need to focus on is what do you do in those 2 weeks to make that $2,000? Okay. Well, in 2 weeks, you work what? 80 hours, Monday through Friday. You get $2,000 on that second week. Okay. So instead of focusing on how to increase the $2,000, how about we just figure out how are you making that $2,000 and then shrinking the time period in which you make the $2,000 in? Well, over the course of 2 weeks, you work 80 hours to make $2,000. Okay, so take those 80 hours, and this is the easiest way to do it. Okay, but I'm going to give you better examples down the road. Take those 80 hours and then just go do the 80 hours in 1 week and then do it again. Now you worked 160 hours in 2 weeks and you just doubled your income. Congratulations. Okay. Now, obviously, that means you have to work more hours, so that's not the most effective way to do it, but that's at the lowest form. The quickest way you can double your income is we'll simply work the same amount of hours that you typically do in 2 weeks and do it in 1 week. So you can double your production, double your money. So, but that's all you have to do. It's that simple. You just have to start looking at what you do and shrinking the time period in which you do it. Okay? So perfect example is in sales, right? So in sales, where you're commission-based, where you want to be commission-based at least, right? You want to be in commission-based sales, and you're working, and let's say the best month you've ever had was, we'll give it in insurance terms, the best month you ever had was $10,000 in business, okay? So what salespeople will tend to do is they'll get into the mindset of, well, how do I do 20,000 a month, and how do I do 30,000? How do I do 40,000 a month? And they stress themselves out because they're trying to figure out how they're going to write so much more business than what they're used to writing. And so they're focusing on the outcome as opposed to the process that gets you the outcome. So how do you want to look at this and say, well, if my best month is $10,000 in sales, instead of saying, well, how do I write 40,000 for the month? Figure out what you did over the course of that month when you wrote 10,000. What were your presentation numbers? How many presentations did you give? How many appointments did you set? How many phone calls did you make? Pull all the data. Now, all you have to do is go, all right, let me just shrink the time frame in which I accomplish those same results, because I've already done it before. I know what the work looks like. Let me just shrink the time period I do it in. So if you do it over the course of a month, let's say we subtract it into 2 weeks, okay? So over the course of the month, let's say you gave 40 presentations in 4 weeks, 10 presentations a week. Okay, well now let's give 40 presentations in 2 weeks. So instead of giving 10 prezos a week, now you're giving 20 prezos a week. Well, what did you do to get 10 prezos in a week? Let's say you had 30 appointments. Okay, so now in 1 week, set 60 appointments. How are you going to set more appointments? make more dials, double your dials that you were typically making on a week-to-week basis. Congratulations. Now you just quadrupled your production. Okay. So you have to start looking at this differently. It's not about how do I increase my result? How do I affect my result? The result is the result. Once you get that result, you can't change it. What you need to change are the inputs. What you need to change is the process, the way in which you're approaching the current system. Okay. So start shrinking the time frame in which you're doing these things, right? So for a business, same idea. Okay, let's say you're no longer in commission sales. Let's say you're in a business and you're selling t-shirts, okay? So what were the most t-shirts you ever sold in a month? Maybe it was 10, maybe it was 5. Your business sucks right now. Okay, that's fine. It's a start though. At least you sold 5 in a month. Well, if you sold 5 in the month, how many cold DMs did you send? How many people did you call? How many referrals did you get off of the people that you sold, right? Really actually dissect your numbers, dissect the data and say, what did I do to accomplish 5 t-shirt sales in that month? Okay, whatever you did in that month, do it in 2 weeks now. Increase your input. And then in turn, you're going to increase your outcome. You're going to increase your profitability. You're going to increase the money that you're making. Now that you're making money, now that you have surplus, now you have the ability to invest and improve on your systems and processes. Now you can become more effective in that same amount of time. But that's the goal, is you got to be able to shrink the time in which you accomplish these sorts of things. Okay? So dissect your numbers, shrink the time frame in which you're doing it. Okay? This is also good for managing your focus. All right? So when you're trying to generate income, there's about 20% of activities that are going to generate 80% of your income, and 80% of your activities are going to generate 20% of your income. Okay? It's the 80-20 rule, the Pareto rule. So when you look at your business or your sales or whatever the fuck it is that you're doing to make money, identify the 20% of activities that you're doing that are doing 80% of your revenue, of your income. Okay? And I see this all the time. This is a massive mistake people make when it comes to business. They focus doing a bunch of bullshit that doesn't really make them any money, right? It's all, it's motion. It's all motion as opposed to action, right? There's a difference between action and motion. Motion is preparation. Motion is studying for the exam. Motion is, doing office hours and going to class and doing all the bullshit in preparation, when action is actually taking the exam and passing it, right? So a lot of times what people get caught up with in their business is they're going to do a bunch of things just to be busy, just to accomplish tasks, just to set up material, whatever, just a bunch of busy work that doesn't actually generate any kind of income. And because people think that they're actually doing tasks, they think they're making progress, when in reality, they're not really doing anything. You're not making money. If you're not making money, you're not doing anything. That's literally the data. It's as simple as that. I keep things very simple, very black and white. Are you making money? No. Then what you're doing doesn't make money. So you need to figure out what are the 20% of activities that you do that actually generate a revenue. What is actually making you money? Okay, for an example, for a business, running ads and people clicking on your ad and buying your product is actually making money. In sales, doing presentations is what's actually making you money, right? Not going through your leads and deciding who you want to call and what your system's going to be, and then emailing people and then text knocking people and doing all this other bullshit that helps with productivity. But that in and of itself is not a revenue generating activities. The actual revenue generating activity is running the presentation. Okay? So you want to spend most of your time possible actually actively presenting, giving as many presentations as possible, right? Same thing with a business where you're selling a product. What are the things that are generating in revenue? Ads, video, content creation, growing a following, growing a subscriber count on YouTube, doing things that actually bring eyes to your product or service to then therefore get people to purchase. Those are revenue generating activities. Okay. And so don't get lost into this void of busy work that doesn't actually result in any kind of sales. So I'll give you another example. So let's say somebody comes to you and they say, let's say you have a payment processor, and somebody comes to you and says, I'm going to charge you $10,000. And after people buy your product through your payment processor. I'm going to set up some type of, database where we pull all your customers' information, and then we can send them automated emails every week saying thank you, or giving them a newsletter or some bullshit. Just somebody trying to sell you on a service to do something on the back end after somebody signs up for your, for your product. That in and of itself is not a revenue generating activity. It's not a revenue generating anything. It's just something on the back end after somebody signs up to, give them more value. Cool. Not that you shouldn't do it, but that shouldn't be your first priority. You know what's more important? What service, what can I do? What can I improve to get more people to sign up in the first place? Because I'm more interested in people signing up. I'm more interested in enrollments. I'm more interested in making sales, because that's what's going to bring the money in. If I'm bringing more and more money in, I can deal with the bullshit otherwise. I can deal with the other bullshit later. The problem is that people will cope and they'll say, well, in order for me to be able to make money, I need to do all this stuff in preparation. And it's just cope because they're not making money, so they're just going to do more stuff that doesn't make money to make it seem like they're doing something. When that in reality is not what you're trying to do. The whole point is to make money. And then as soon as you start making money, figure out how to make that same amount of money in a smaller time frame. Okay? So the whole overarching point of that, this 80-20 rule, is you have to manage your focus and focus 80% of your time on the 20% of tasks that actually make you money. That's what you should be worried about most of the time. So for me, for this business, the Taylor's Code, the network for the ultimate professional, what are my revenue generating activities? Creating content that grows my YouTube account that sends people to the Taylor's Code's website. That's a revenue generating activity for me. Making content, putting it out, and growing a channel. That's how I make money. Something that's not a revenue generating activity would be building out the Discord and adding more channels and putting stuff in the Discord, right? Yeah, it's one of the 80% of tasks that I have to do because that's a part of the business, but that only would generate me 20% of my income. And that would only just be because of people retaining their subscription, right? But that in and of itself doesn't actually make money. Does that make sense? So the point I'm saying is I'm going to put less time and energy and focus into, building out the Discord and what the Discord looks like, as opposed to what I'm going to put into making good content, growing my brand, growing the network, getting people to join. That's what's important. That's my 80% of time on my 20% of activities.